I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I heard it, the low diesel growl rolling across the tree line. At first, I thought it was road work. Then I saw the orange stakes. They weren't on HOA land. They were on mine. By 7:30, a bulldozer blade was chewing through the cedar windbreak my wife and I planted 20 years ago. I walked the fence line slow, tablet in hand, pulled up the county GIS overlay, parcel numbers, coordinates, bearings. Every line matched my deed. By noon, concrete trucks were backing in like they'd been invited. I drove to the HOA office, air conditioning humming, smiling receptionist. The president came out, polished and relaxed. He told me it was common expansion property. Said I should double-check my paperwork. I told him I already had. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my deed covered more than dirt. It covered the upstream retention structure that controlled every drop of runoff, feeding their new subdivision. I didn't call the police. I went home, unlocked a filing cabinet, and started pulling paper. I bought this land 28 years ago, with a second-hand pickup and a bank loan that made my hands sweat. Paid it off in 12. Never missed a tax bill. Not once. I'm a retired civil engineer, stormwater systems, small municipal projects, the unglamorous bones that keep towns standing when the rain comes hard. When we installed the upstream agricultural retention dam back in the late 90s, I kept everything. Original plats rolled in cardboard tubes. Environmental impact filings, letters from the Army Corps with coffee stains on the corners. Every revision, every signature. I've always believed systems work if you respect them enough to understand them. My wife helped plant the cedar line. Those machines tore through this morning. My daughter learned to fish off the edge of that reservoir. The dam still feeds 2 neighboring farms through regulated seasonal release. It isn't decorative. It's functional, necessary. I'm not flashy. Never have been. I don't shout when someone cuts me off in traffic. I read the fine print. Paper beats power. Every time. As I spread the plats across the dining room table, something in the annexation filing didn't line up, and that's when I realized exactly who I was dealing with. The HOA president liked to call himself a community builder, former developer, perfect teeth, always in pressed shirts even on Saturdays. He spoke in phrases like growth corridor and value optimization, like neighborhoods were spreadsheets instead of homes. At the last open meeting, he described my acreage as user surplus, said expansion was inevitable, said progress required vision. What he didn't mention was how fast they pushed it through. The annexation filing was rushed, submit 2 days before Thanksgiving. The survey was done by a firm that had worked his last 3 developments. Boundary adjustments were recorded without adjacent landowner acknowledgement. Mine, the vote approving expansion? December 23rd. Barely a dozen residents present. Minutes stamped and filed before New Year's. On paper, it looked clean, technically compliant. But it leaned on assumptions. On the idea that no one would check the old plats. That was the difference between us. He built things to flip them. I built things to last. When I filed a formal boundary dispute with the county clerk's office, I kept my tone neutral, and my documentation precise. That's when the letters started showing up. The first violation notice came 3 days later. Outlined fencing. The fence had been there since 1999. The second claimed my dam was an improper water management structure requiring HOA architectural approval. That one almost made me laugh. Almost. By the end of the week, they were threatening daily fines. Compounding. Then the quiet stuff started. Road maintenance crews skipped my stretch of gravel. Trash pickup was delayed due to route adjustments. Neighbors who'd waved for years suddenly found their phones fascinating when I walked past. Most of them had deposits down on those new builds. They didn't want friction. Pressure doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just leans. I hired an independent surveyor out of the next county. Gray-haired guy who still carried a steel tape measure. 2 weeks later, he handed me stamped results. Clear encroachment. Not inches. Feet. I submitted everything to the county for enforcement review. And then, nothing. Calls unreturned. Emails acknowledged but unanswered. Under evaluation. That's when I started asking a different question. Why was the county stalling? I filed a formal cease and desist against the HOA the next morning. Their attorney responded before lunch. Their attorney's letter was 6 pages of polished intimidation. I was interfering with lawful development. I was causing material financial harm. I was threatening community investment stability. Buried near the bottom was a line about exploring all available remedies, including conversations with municipal partners about acquisition authority, a soft way of saying eminent domain without actually having it. I drove into the city and sat across from a property rights attorney who'd seen this play before. He read the letter once, then pushed it aside. "They don't have eminent domain," he said flatly. "And if they failed proper notification during annexation, that filing's vulnerable." That was the good news, the bad news. Litigation could drag for years. Meanwhile, those homes were already 60% framed. Roof lines cutting into my horizon. Time wasn't neutral. It favored whoever poured concrete fastest. As I stood to leave, he asked one more question. "Do you still control upstream retention rights?" I paused. "Yes." He held my gaze a second longer than necessary. "Good." The next morning, before the sun burned off the mist, I drove out to the dam, not to do anything reckless, just to check something. There's a certain quiet at the reservoir before sunrise. Mist rides low over the surface, and everything sounds dampened, like the world hasn't fully decided to wake up. I walked the gravel path to the control gate and wrapped my hand around the steel wheel. Cold, solid. Familiar, this retention dam predates the HOA by almost a decade. Federally registered, inspected, maintained. When we built it, the agricultural exemption allowed me seasonal flow control rights to manage irrigation downstream. That authority never transferred. I stood there listening to water press against concrete and thought about those half-framed houses below. Their drainage plans tied directly into regulated runoff from this basin. Not uncontrolled, regulated. I didn't touch the wheel. Instead, I drove into town and requested updated stormwater compliance filings for the new subdivision. Approved, stamped, signed. Based on site plans, assuming the land beneath those foundations belonged to the HOA. Late that afternoon, a county clerk I've known for years called me back quietly. "You might want to see the original environmental impact study," she said. The environmental impact study was thicker than I expected. Tabs, appendices, hydrology charts. I sat at my dining room table again, same place I'd spread the plats, and read every page. Halfway through, I found it. Development approval was explicitly contingent on verified downstream ownership and written acknowledgement from the upstream water controller before final drainage certification. That controller was me. There was no acknowledgement in the county record. No signature. No waiver. Nothing. Which raised a question I still haven't gotten a straight answer to. Why would the county approve without it? I called my attorney. By the next morning, he filed 3 things: a motion for temporary injunction, a formal boundary enforcement complaint, and notice of water rights compliance review tied to the subdivision's drainage dependency. Then I scheduled a seasonal water release adjustment hearing, routine, lawful, within my agricultural exemption parameters. Public record, proper notice, no dramatic gestures, no surprise releases. Just exercising documented rights the way they were designed to be exercised. For the first time since the bulldozers showed up, the pressure shifted direction. All residents invited, and when word reached buyers building those 37 homes, the tone in the neighborhood changed overnight. They scheduled the emergency meeting for a Thursday night. By the time I walked in, the room was already standing room only. Framed buyers, contractors. A few reporters from the local paper lingering near the back. Earlier that week, disclosure letters had gone out. Drainage compliance under review. Insurance risk classifications subject to change. Possible construction suspension pending injunction. People were angry, and not at me. The HOA president took the floor first. Smooth voice, tight smile. Called my actions retaliatory. said I was weaponizing technicalities against families just trying to move in. When he finished, I stood up with a folder under my arm. I didn't raise my voice. I laid my deed on the table, then the certified survey overlays. Then the highlighted environmental clause requiring my written acknowledgement. Finally, a stamped statement from the county file showing it didn't exist. A county representative shifted in his seat and confirmed there had been a procedural oversight. That word hung in the air. I explained I would proceed with a lawful seasonal flow recalibration hearing, unless the trespass was remedied and compliance restored. No threats, no theatrics, just the law applied evenly. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Within 48 hours, the framing crews stopped showing up. Once the crews pulled out, the dominoes fell fast. Lenders issued funding freezes pending compliance clarification. Without clear drainage certification, risk models shifted. Money stopped moving. Buyers who'd been defending the board a week earlier were now calling attorneys of their own. Deposits, delays, disclosure exposure. The word lawsuit started circling. 2 board members resigned within days. The county announced an internal procedural review, careful language, but serious enough. The HOA president asked to meet privately. We sat across from each other in a quiet diner off the highway. He slid an offer across the table to purchase my acreage, below market value, framed as ending the conflict. I didn't touch the paper. This isn't a misunderstanding, I told him. It's a boundary. A week later, the independent survey was formally validated in court. The judge granted a temporary injunction, halting further construction pending resolution of the encroachment and drainage compliance failures. 37 houses stood half-finished. Wrapped in weatherproofing, windows dark, silent, it would have been easy to let them bleed. Instead, I called my attorney with a different idea. I didn't want ruins on my conscience, so we negotiated. The HOA formally de-annexed my land and recorded it. A public apology went into the official minutes. The subdivision redesign stayed inside its lawful boundary, with independent environmental oversight written in. In return, I agreed to maintain regulated seasonal flow during the transition, so no buyer paid for a board's shortcut. I also placed the acreage and dam rights into a small land trust with clear restrictions. No future expansion without direct, documented consent. At the next meeting, the tone had changed. Not friendly exactly, but respectful paper beats power. Every time. This was never about flooding houses, or teaching anyone a lesson through damage. It was about stopping a shortcut before it hardened into precedent. So let me ask you something. Have you ever checked the original plat map of your property? Would you have fought or settled? Should HOAs have hard limits on expansion? Next week, I'll tell you about the HOA that fined a veteran over a flagpole until federal law stepped in. Now what you own. Because someone else might be counting on you not knowing.